This story happened to us about a year ago, and I was afraid to tell it. Please support me and listen to the end. My wife and I have always been close to my family, so her exclusion from my brother's wedding left us stunned. What began as a simple invitation quickly spiraled into a family conflict that forced me to choose between my wife and my family. I've been married to my wife, Emily, for 5 years. We've always been close with my family, attending all the get-togethers, holiday gatherings, and even the spontaneous family cookouts. I especially enjoy spending time with my younger brother, Alex, who's always been like my best friend. Recently, Alex got engaged to his fiancée, Lily, and I was genuinely thrilled for them. It seemed like things were lining up perfectly. Emily had always fit in well with my family, or so I thought. Then, a few weeks ago, I received Alex's wedding invitation. I'll admit, I was looking forward to his big day for a long time, celebrating his commitment, reconnecting with relatives, and just being there for him on one of the most important days of his life. The invitation was beautiful, an elegant card with gold accents that made me realize just how formal and special this wedding would be. But then, as I read the invitation, something caught me completely off guard. Only my name was listed. Emily's was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought it was just a simple mistake. I even checked the envelope and invitation again, assuming there might be some mention of her I'd missed. But no, it was clear as day, this invite was for me alone. I couldn't imagine why Alex and Lily would exclude her, especially when we've been married for years and have attended every family event together. A bit shaken, I thought it over and decided to reach out to my mom for an explanation. She and I are close, and I figured she'd know what was going on. I casually mentioned the invitation, expecting her to reassure me that it was all a simple misunderstanding. Instead, she hesitated, her voice sounding oddly distant. She muttered something vague about how Alex and Lily were trying to keep the guest list small and hinted that plus ones might not have made the cut. The way she said it felt so dismissive, like she was brushing it under the rug. Her words didn't sit well with me, and I felt my heart sink a little. But I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself that maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a logistical issue. At that point, I decided not to say anything to Emily until I was sure what was going on. I didn't want to upset her over what might turn out to be nothing. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my gut that day, because what started as a small seed of doubt quickly grew into something much bigger. After a few days of going back and forth in my mind, I knew I couldn't keep the invitation a secret from Emily any longer. It was eating away at me, and I figured she'd start noticing that something was off soon enough. So, one evening after dinner, I decided to bring it up. "Hey, Emily," I started, trying to sound casual, "I got Alex's wedding invitation in the mail the other day." Her face lit up instantly, like she was just as excited as I'd been to attend. She asked if she could see it, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Actually, there's something a little weird about it," I admitted, as carefully as I could. I explained how her name wasn't on the invitation, that it seemed to be addressed to me alone. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion. I quickly added that it was probably just a mistake, something we could easily clear up. But the hurt on her face was obvious. "So, they didn't invite me?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost as if she was talking to herself. I felt terrible. Emily has always been the kind of person who values family, always eager to help out, to be there for my family whenever they needed anything. For her, not being invited wasn't just an oversight, it felt personal, like a deliberate snub. I tried to reassure her, repeating what my mom had said about the guest list being tight. "It's probably just a mix-up, nothing more," I said. But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. If it was just a misunderstanding, why had my mom sounded so off when I asked about it? Determined to get to the bottom of things, I texted Alex a few days later. I kept it light, just asking about the invitation and if there was a mix-up with Emily's. But, surprisingly, I got no reply. Normally, he's quick to respond, so his silence felt odd. Then came the weekend barbecue at my cousin's place. I thought maybe Alex would be there, and I'd have a chance to ask him face to face. As luck would have it, I overheard a conversation between a few family members talking about the wedding guest list. I wasn't paying too close attention until someone brought up that everyone's significant others were invited, everyone's except for Emily. Hearing that hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a mistake. Emily's exclusion was deliberate. I knew then that I couldn't keep this quiet any longer. Whatever was happening, it was more than just a guest list issue. Determined to get answers, I decided I couldn't let this go. I had to confront Alex directly about why Emily wasn't welcome at his wedding. I texted him again, this time more firmly, asking if we could meet up. After several hours of silence, he finally responded, saying we could talk later in the week. He mentioned he'd be bringing Lily, which, honestly, was fine by me. I wanted to hear her reasoning too. When the day came, I headed to the little restaurant we'd agreed on, with a mix of anxiety and frustration bubbling up inside me. I had told Emily about the meeting beforehand, promising her I'd get to the bottom of things. She gave me a small, worried nod, and I knew she was just as anxious as I was. She didn't want to go herself, and I couldn't blame her. I wasn't even sure what I was walking into. When I arrived, Alex and Lily were already seated, tucked away in a corner booth. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I sat down. Lily had her arms crossed, her face set in a rigid expression, while Alex looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. We skipped the small talk and got right to it. I asked why Emily wasn't invited to their wedding. Alex shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. But it was Lily who answered, her voice blunt and unfiltered. She said she didn't feel comfortable with Emily being there, claiming that Emily had made comments at a family gathering last year that rubbed her the wrong way. According to Lily, Emily had implied that she wasn't a good match for Alex, that she didn't fit into our family. I was floored. Emily? Making comments like that? It didn't sound like her at all. I tried to ask for specifics, but Lily's explanation was vague, as if she'd rehearsed just enough to avoid giving real details. I looked at Alex, hoping he'd step in and set things straight, but he stayed quiet, eyes glued to the table. Frustration boiling over, I pressed harder. I told them this didn't make sense, that if there had been a misunderstanding, we could have resolved it. But Lily stood her ground, insisting she didn't want any negative energy at the wedding. She didn't want to risk any drama on her special day. The way she said it made it clear, she saw Emily as nothing more than a problem to be kept at a distance. When I looked at Alex, he finally spoke up, though his words didn't bring any relief. He mumbled something about supporting Lily, that it was her day and he had to respect her wishes. The betrayal hit me hard. My own brother was willing to exclude my wife from his wedding, all for the sake of avoiding a hypothetical scene. I left the meeting feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Alex had chosen sides, and it wasn't ours. As I walked out of that restaurant, I realized the damage went deeper than just a wedding invite. This was a fracture in our family, one I wasn't sure we could repair. As the wedding day crept closer, I felt more torn than ever. On one hand, this was my little brother's wedding, a moment I'd been looking forward to sharing with him for months. On the other, how could I possibly attend without Emily, knowing the hurt it would cause her? It felt like I was being asked to choose between my family and my marriage, and no matter which side I picked, it seemed I'd lose something important. I spent sleepless nights agonizing over it, replaying my conversation with Alex and Lily. Every time I imagined sitting in that church alone, my heart sank. Emily had done nothing to deserve being left out, yet here she was, hurt and isolated, all because of some perceived slight that Alex and Lily couldn't even properly explain. One night, I decided to talk it through with my best friend, Mark. Over a couple of beers, I laid out the whole situation, sparing no detail. Mark listened patiently, nodding along as I recounted Lily's vague accusations and Alex's silence. When I finally finished, he shook his head. "Look, man, what they're doing to Emily is messed up. If you go to that wedding without her, it's like saying you're okay with her being excluded. You don't want to send that message, trust me." His words hit me hard. I knew he was right. Going without Emily would be like silently agreeing with my family's choice to shut her out, and I couldn't do that to her or to us. Emily had been there for me through thick and thin, always loyal, always by my side. It was time for me to prove I could do the same for her. The next morning, I sat down with Emily and told her my decision. "I'm not going to the wedding," I said firmly. "Not if you're not invited." She looked at me with a mix of surprise and relief, but I could still see the sadness in her eyes. Even though my decision reassured her, the whole situation had already left its mark on both of us. We shouldn't have even been in a position where this choice had to be made. With that decision made, I picked up the phone and called Alex. I told him I wouldn't be attending the wedding if my wife was excluded. He seemed stunned, like he hadn't expected me to go through with it. He tried to convince me, saying I was overreacting and making things harder than they needed to be. But I held my ground. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore, it was about standing by my wife when she needed me most. That phone call set off a chain reaction. First, my parents reached out, furious that I'd even consider skipping my own brother's wedding. They accused me of letting Emily manipulate me, of putting my marriage above my family obligations. Their words stung, and for a moment, I felt guilty. But I reminded myself that loyalty to Emily was the right choice. This was my family now, and she deserved my full support. Within hours, the news spread through the family. Some relatives sent supportive messages, but others weren't so kind. I received a few passive-aggressive texts from cousins, hinting that I was whipped or blowing things out of proportion. It felt like the whole family was weighing in, and most of them didn't see things from our perspective. But through all the noise, Emily's gratitude kept me grounded. She looked at me differently after that, like she finally felt she wasn't standing alone. The rift between me and my family hurt, but standing by her, showing her she was my priority, meant more to me than keeping the peace. In the weeks after the wedding, the silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts, no outreach. Part of me had expected anger, accusations, even guilt trips, but the quiet left me wondering if they were hoping I'd just come crawling back, ready to apologize for standing by my wife. I was beginning to accept that our relationship with my family might never go back to how it used to be, and maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Then, out of the blue one evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. It was short and cautious. "We should talk. I'd like to apologize." For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she was ready to understand, to hear our side. I showed the message to Emily, who looked as surprised as I felt. We both knew my mom's version of an apology might be just another attempt to sweep things under the rug, but I decided to meet her, giving her the benefit of the doubt one last time. We met at a quiet coffee shop nearby. My mom looked uncomfortable as she sat across from me, skipping the pleasantries and diving straight into what she called an apology. But her words were carefully chosen, full of ifs and maybes. "I'm sorry if you and Emily felt hurt," she said. "I didn't mean for things to get this far. I just wanted Alex's day to be peaceful." The more she spoke, the more I felt a familiar frustration bubbling up inside me. She wasn't acknowledging what she had done, she was sidestepping it, making it sound like Emily and I were the ones overreacting. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Mom, this isn't about keeping the peace," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is about respect. Excluding Emily from the wedding wasn't just an oversight, it was a message, and it hurt both of us. I need you to understand that." Her face tightened at my words, and I saw her defensiveness rise. She started going on about how she hadn't wanted drama at the wedding, insisting that she'd acted with the family's best interests in mind. At that moment, I knew this conversation wasn't going to go anywhere. The apology was hollow, just another attempt to move past it without truly making things right. I finally told her the truth. Until she and the rest of the family could respect Emily as part of our family, I couldn't keep up this charade. After that meeting, I went home to Emily and told her everything. She listened in silence, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, she simply reached for my hand and squeezed it. That night, we had a long talk about what our future would look like and decided it was time to set some boundaries. I was done bending over backward to please people who couldn't accept my wife. I didn't want Emily to keep feeling like she had to tiptoe around my family to avoid conflict, and I didn't want to live with the constant tension anymore. We decided to take a step back from my family for a while, to focus on us. For the first time in weeks, we felt a sense of relief. We started talking about plans we'd pushed aside, like a vacation we'd been dreaming of and the idea of moving to a new city. The more we discussed it, the more excited we got. It felt like we were finally choosing our own path, putting our energy into building something positive together instead of mending old family wounds. In the end, this entire ordeal taught me a painful but important lesson. Family isn't just about blood ties, it's about loyalty, respect, and the people who stand by you no matter what. Emily had always been that person for me, and now I was finally showing her the same in return. It was bittersweet to realize that my relationship with my family might never be the same, but standing by Emily was the best decision I could have made. We were stronger than ever, ready to face whatever came next, together.